Hello everyone, hope you're doing great. So it's been a long time since we published a video, and yeah, there were some personal reasons for it, but no worries, let's start and go ahead with it. So last time we studied about Banaras Hindu University created by Madan Mohan Walviya. We are on chapter number 10, that is Growth of New India, Religious and Social Reform after 1858. If you have a book in your hand, the page number is 176, and we will start with the topic Sayyid Ahmad Khan and Aligarh School. Here it goes. Movements for religious reform were late in emerging among Muslims. The Muslim upper classes had tended to avoid contact with Western education and culture. It was mainly after the revolt of 1857 that modern ideas of religious reform began to appear. A beginning in this direction was made when the Mohammedan Literary Society was founded at Calcutta in 1863. This society promoted discussion of religious, social, and political questions in the light of modern ideas and encouraged the upper and middle class Muslims to take to Western education. The most important reformer among the Muslims was Sayyid Ahmad Khan. He was tremendously impressed by modern scientific thought and worked all his life to reconcile it with Islam. Then he did first of all by declaring that Quran alone was the authoritative work for Islam and all other Islamic writings were secondary. Even the Quran he interpreted in the light of contemporary rationalism and science. In his view, the interpretation of Quran that conflicted with human reason, science or nature was reality a misinterpretation. Nor were religious tenets immutable, he said. If religion did not change with time, it would become fossiled, as had happened in India. All his life he struggled against the blind obedience of tradition, dependence on custom, ignorance and irrationalism. He urged the people to develop a critical approach and freedom of thought. So long as freedom of thought is not developed, there can be no civilized life, he declared. He also warned against fanaticism, narrow-mindedness and exclusiveness, and urged students and others to be broad-minded and tolerant. A closed mind, he said, was a hallmark of social and intellectual backwardness. Praising the study of world classics, he remarked, the student will learn to appreciate the temper with which great minds approach the consideration of great questions. He will discover that truth is many-sided, that it is not identical or merely coexistive with individual opinion, and that the world is good deal wider than his own sect, society or class. Sayyid Ahmad Khan believed that religious and social life of Muslims could be improved only by imbibing modern Western scientific knowledge and culture. Therefore, promotion of modern education remained his first task throughout his life. As an official, he founded schools in many towns and had many Western books translated into Urdu. In 1875, he founded at Aligarh the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College as Center for Spreading Western Sciences and Culture. Later this college grew into Aligarh Muslim University. Sayyid Ahmad Khan was a great believer in religious toleration. He believed that all religions had a certain underlying unity which could be called practical morality. Believing that a person's religion was his or her private affair, he roundly condemned any sign of religious bigotry in personal relations. He was also opposed to communal friction. Appealing to Hindus and Muslims to unite, he said in 1883, now both of us live in air of India, drink the holy waters of Ganga and Jamuna. We both feed upon the products of Indian soil. We are together in life and death, living in India. Both of us have changed our blood. The color of our bodies has become the same, our features have become similar, and Muslims have adopted numerous Hindu customs. The Hindus have accepted many Muslim traits of conduct. We became so fused that we developed the new language of Urdu, which was neither our language nor that of Hindus. Therefore, if we accept that part of our lives which belongs to God, then undoubtedly, in consideration of the fact that we both belong to the same country, we are a nation, and the progress and welfare of the country, we both of us depend on the unity, mutual sympathy, and love, while our mutual disagreement, obstinacy, and opposition and ill feeling are sure to destroy us. Moreover, Hindus, Parsis and Christians had freely contributed to the funds of his college, whose doors were also open to all Indians. For example, in 1898, there were 64 Hindu and 285 Muslim students in the college. Out of the 7 Indian teachers, 2 were Hindu, one of them being a professor of Sanskrit. However, towards the end of his life, he began to talk of Hindu domination to prevent his followers from joining the rising national movement. This was unfortunate. Though basically he was not a communist, he only wanted the backwardness of Muslim middle and upper classes to go. His politics were the result of his firm belief that the immediate political progress was not possible because the British government could not be easily dislodged. On the other hand, any hostility by the officials might prove dangerous to the educational effort which he saw was the need of the hour. He believed that only when Indians had become as modern as their thinking and actions as English were, could they hope successfully challenge foreign rule. He therefore advised all Indians, particularly the educationally backward Muslims, to remain aloof from the politics from some time to come. The time for politics, he said, has not yet come. In fact, he had become so committed to his college and the cause of education that he was willing to sacrifice all other interests to them. Consequently, to prevent the Orthodox Muslims from opposing his college, he virtually gave up his agitation in favor of religious reform. For the same reason, he would not do anything to offend the government and, on the other hand, encourage communalism and separatism. This was, of course, a serious political error, which was to have harmful consequences in later years. Moreover, some of his followers deviated from his broad mindedness and tended later to glorify Islam and its past while criticizing other religions. Sayyid Ahmad's reformist zeal also embraced a social sphere. He urged Muslims to give up medieval customs and ways of thought and behavior. In particular, he wrote in favor of raising women's status in society and advocated removal of purda or the spread of education among women. He also condemned the customs of polygamy and easy divorce. Sayyid Ahmad Khan was helped by a band of loyal followers who are collectively described as Aligarh School. Chirag Ali, the Urdu poet Altaf Hussain, Hali Nazar Ahmad and Maulana Shibli Nomani were some of other distinguished leaders of the Aligarh school. Muhammad Iqbal. One of the greatest poets of modern India, Muhammad Iqbal, 1876 to 1938, also profoundly influenced through his poetry the philosophical and religious outlook of the younger generation of Muslims as well as of Hindus. Like Swami Vivekananda, he emphasized the need of constant change and ceaseless activity and condemned resignation, contemplation, and quiet contentment. He urged the adoption of dynamic outlook that would help change the world. He was basically a humanist. In fact, he raised human action to the status of prime virtue. Man should not submit to nature or powers that be, he said, but should control this world through constant activity. Nothing was more sinful in his eyes than the passive acceptance of things as they were. Condemning ritualism and other worldly attitude, he urged men to work for and achieve happiness in this world of living. In his earlier poetry, he extolled patriotism, though later he encouraged Muslim separatism. Religious reform among the Parsis. Religious reform was begun among the Parsis in Bombay in middle of the 19th century. In 1851, the Rehnumai Mazdesan Sabha or Religious Reform Association was started by Naroji Furdonoji, Dadabhai Naroji, S.S. Bengali and others. It campaigned against the entrenched orthodoxy in the religious field and initiated the modernization of Parsi social customs regarding the education of women, marriage and the social position of women in general. In course of time, the Parsis became socially the most westernized section of Indian society. Religious reform among the Sikhs. Religious reform among the Sikhs was begun at the end of 19th century when the Khalsa College was started at Amritsar. But the reform effort gained momentum after 1920 when the Akali movement rose in Punjab. The main aim of the Akalis was to purify the management of Gurdwaras or Sikh shrines. These gurdwaras had been heavily endowed with land and money by devout Sikhs, but they had come to be managed autocratically by corrupt and selfish Mahants. The Sikh masses, led by the Akalis, started in 1921 a powerful satyagraha against the Mahants and the government which aided them. The Akalis soon forced the government to pass a new Gurdwara Act in 1922, which was later amended in 1925. Sometimes with the aid of the Act, but often through direct action, the Sikhs gradually turned out of the Gurdwaras and the corrupt Mahants, even though hundreds of lives had to be sacrificed in the process. Apart from the reform movements and individual reformers discussed above, there were numerous other similar movements and individuals during the 19th and the 20th centuries. The religious reform movements of modern times had an underlying unity. Most of them were based on the twin doctrines of reason, rationalism and humanism, though they also sometimes tended to appeal to faith and ancient authority to bolster their appeal. Moreover, it was to the rising middle classes and the modern educated intellectuals that they appealed most. They tried to free from anti-intellectual religious dogmas and blind faith the human intellect's capacity to think and reason. They opposed the ritualistic, superstitious, irrational, and obscure, obscurist elements in Indian religions. Many of them abandoned, though to varying degrees, the principle of authority in religion and evaluated truth in any religion or its holy books by its conformity to logic, reasons, or science. Swami Vivekananda said, "Is religion to justify itself by the discoveries of reason, through which every science justifies itself? Are the same methods of investigation which applied to science and knowledge outside to be applied to science of religion? In my opinion, this must be so, and I am also of the opinion that the sooner this is done, the better." Some of these religious reformers appealed to tradition and claimed that they were merely reviving the pure doctrines, beliefs, and practices of the past. But in fact, the past could not be revived. Often, there was no agreed picture of the past. The problems that an appeal to the past often created were posed by Justice Ranade, who had himself often asked the people to revive the best tradition of the past in the following words: "What shall we revive? Shall we revive the old habits of our people when the most sacred of our caste indulged in all abominations as we now understand them, of animal food and intoxicating drink? Shall we revive the 12 forms of sons or 8 forms of marriage which included capture and recognized mixed and illegitimate intercourse? Shall we revive the hecatombs of animals sacrificed from year's end to year's end, in which even human beings were not spared as proprietary offering to God? Shall we revive the sati and infanticide customs?" And he came to conclusion that the society as a living organism is constantly changing and can never go back to the past. The dead and the buried or burnt are dead, buried, and burnt once for all, and the dead past cannot therefore be revived. He wrote, "Every reformer who appealed to the past also interpreted it as to make it appear to agree with the reforms he was suggesting. Often the reforms and the outlook were new, only their justification was based on an appeal to the past. Many of the ideas which conflicted with modern scientific knowledge were usually declared to be later accretion or misinterpretation. And since the orthodox could not accept this view, the religious reformers came into conflict with the orthodox sections and became, at least in the beginning, religious and social rebels. For example, this is what Lala Lajpat Rai writes regarding to orthodox opposition to Swami Dayanand. The amount of obloquy and persecution to which Swami Dayanand was exposed in his lifetime may be gathered from the fact that numerous attempts were made on his life by the orthodox Hindus. Assassins were hired to kill him Missiles were thrown at him during the lectures and disruption. He was called a hired emissary of the Christians, an apostate, an atheist, and so on. Similarly, Sayyid Ahmad Khan aroused the anger of traditionalists. They abused him, they issued fatwas against him, and even threatened his life. The humanist aspect of religious reforms movements was expressed in the general attack on priesthood and rituals, and the emphasis on the individual's right to interpret religion scriptures in the light of human reason and human welfare. A significant feature of humanism was expressed in a new humanitarian morality, which included the notion that humanity can progress and has progress, and that moral values are ultimately those which favor human progress. The social reform movements were an embodiment of this new humanitarian morality. Though the reformers tried to reform the religions, their general outlook was universalistic. Ram Mohan Roy saw different religions as particular expressions of a universal God and religious truth. Sayyid Ahmad Khan and that prophets had the same faith or then, and every people had been sent prophets by God. Keshav Chandra Sen expressed the same idea as follows: our position is not that truths are to be found in all religions, but all established religions are true. Apart from purely religious considerations, these religion reforms movements fostered among Indians greater self-respect, self-confidence, and pride in their country. By interpreting their religious past in modern rational terms, and by weeding out many of the corrupting and irrational elements from the 19th century religious beliefs and practices, the reformers enabled their followers to meet the official taunt that their religions and society were decadent and inferior. As Jawaharlal Nehru has put it, the rising middle classes were politically inclined and were not so much in search of a religion, but they wanted some cultural roots to cling on to, something that gave them assurance of their worth, something that would reduce the sense of frustration and humiliation that foreign conquest and rule had produced. The religious reform movements helped many Indians to come to terms with the modern world. In fact, they aroused the recast the old religions into new modern mold to suit the needs of the new social groups of society. Thus, pride in the past did not prevent Indians from accepting the essential superiority of the modern world, in general, the modern science in particular. Of course, some people insisted that they were merely going back to the original, most ancient scriptures, which were suitably interpreted. As a result of the reformed outlook, many Indians began to acquire this worldly, secular, and national outlook in place of a narrow outlook dominated by consideration of caste and religion, though the latter tendency by no means came to an end. Moreover, more and more people began to think in terms of promoting their physical and cultural welfare in this world in place of passively accepting their lot and waiting for improvement in life after death. These movements also, to some extent, ended the India's cultural and intellectual isolation from the rest of the world and enabled Indians to share in the stream of the world ideas. At the same time, they were no longer bewitched by everything in the West. Those who occupied the West blindly were increasingly looked down upon. In fact, while adopting the critical attitude towards backward elements of traditional religions and culture and welcoming positive elements of modern culture, most of the religious reformers also opposed blind imitation of the West and waged an ideological struggle against the colonialization of Indian culture and thought. The problem here was to maintain a balance between the two aspects. Some went too far in modernization and tended to encourage colonization of the culture. Others defended traditional thought, culture, and institutions to the extent of glorifying them and opposing any introduction of modern ideas and culture. The best reformers argued that modern ideas and culture could be best imbibed by integrating them into Indian cultural streams. Thank you everyone for tuning in. This was chapter number 10, Growth of New India, Religious and Social Reforms. In the next recording, we'll start with the next paragraph that starts with two negative aspects of religious reforms movements on page number 181. Thank you for tuning in and staying this long. Hope you have great exams ahead and all the best for your studies and your exams, and hope you do well in them. Thank you and all the best. Do subscribe and share the videos to anyone who is preparing for UPSC Civil Services or just wants to know about the history of modern India. Thank you everyone for tuning in. All the best.